I never imagined my life would come down to a wooden bench in a family courthouse, my name printed on a white paper like a criminal charge. I sat there, staring at the floor, listening to the echo of footsteps and muffled arguments from other broken families. Every sound felt heavier than the last. Across the aisle, my ex-wife sat upright, confident, almost calm. Her hair was neatly tied, her posture straight, like she was attending a victory ceremony, not a hearing that would decide my future. Beside her sat her lawyer, whispering occasionally, nodding as if everything was already settled. She didn't even look at me. 3 months ago, this same woman had cried in my arms, telling me she didn't want our family to fall apart. Now she was demanding child support for 3 kids, kids I had raised, loved, and sacrificed everything for. Or at least that's what everyone believed. The judge entered, and the room went silent. My heart pounded as the clerk read out our case. When my ex stood up to speak, her voice was steady, practiced. She talked about responsibility, about how I had failed as a father, about how she had been carrying the burden alone. Every sentence felt like a knife twisted slowly into my chest. She painted herself as the victim. I wanted to stand up and scream that I had worked double shifts, skipped meals, sold my car, everything to keep our family afloat, that I stayed up nights helping with homework, attended school meetings, and held my kids when they were sick. But the courtroom wasn't a place for emotions, it was a place for evidence, and evidence was exactly why I was there. When it was my turn, the judge looked at me over his glasses and asked if I had anything to say before the child support terms were discussed. My throat went dry. My hands trembled slightly as I stood up. "Yes, Your Honor," I said quietly. I could feel my ex-wife's eyes on me now, sharp, curious, maybe even annoyed. She probably thought I was about to beg for a reduced amount, or maybe she expected excuses. Instead, I reached into my bag. Inside was a thick brown envelope, slightly worn, sealed. The same envelope I had debated opening 100 times, but never did, because once it was opened, there would be no going back. It held answers I wasn't sure I was ready to face, and truths I knew would destroy more than just this case. "I would like to submit this to the court," I said, holding it up. The judge raised an eyebrow. "What is it?" Before I could answer, my ex-wife stiffened. Her confident posture faltered just a little. For the first time that morning, she looked directly at the envelope, and then at me. Something passed over her face. Fear, recognition, panic. Her lawyer leaned toward her and whispered something urgently. She shook her head almost imperceptibly, but her hands clenched together in her lap. I hadn't opened the envelope yet, but somehow she already knew what was inside. And that was the moment I realized this hearing was never about money. It was about a secret she thought would stay buried forever. As the judge asked me to step forward and open the envelope in front of everyone, I wondered, was I about to lose my children or finally learn the truth about them? The judge nodded toward the clerk. "You may step forward and submit the document." My legs felt heavy as I walked. Every step echoed like a countdown. I could feel the weight of my ex-wife's stare burning into my back. I didn't turn around. If I did, I knew I might lose the courage I had barely managed to gather. The clerk took the envelope from my hands. It looked ordinary, no bold stamps, no threatening labels, just my name written neatly in black ink. yet it carried the power to erase years of lies. "Would you like to explain what this document contains?" the judge asked. I swallowed. "Yes, Your Honor. But first, I'd like permission to open it here, in court." That was when my ex-wife finally broke. "Your Honor," she interrupted quickly, standing up, "this is unnecessary. This hearing is about child support, not—" The judge raised a hand. "Sit down, ma'am. I'll decide what's necessary." She froze. Slowly, she sat back down, her face no longer confident. Her lawyer leaned in again, whispering urgently, but she didn't respond. Her eyes were locked on that envelope like it was a ticking bomb. I took a deep breath and broke the seal. The sound was small, barely noticeable, but in my head it roared. Inside were several folded pages. The first was a medical report, the second a lab seal, the third a date that made my stomach drop. This envelope was delivered to my office 2 months ago. It was marked confidential. I didn't open it until after my ex filed for child support. That wasn't entirely true. I had opened it once, late at night, alone, and I'd thrown up in my bathroom sink afterward. The judge leaned forward. "What is this report, Your Honor?" "A paternity test, Your Honor." The room shifted. I heard a gasp behind me, not from my ex-wife, from the audience. People always assume kids automatically belong to the man who raises them. I did too, for years. The judge's expression hardened. "And what does the test conclude?" I hesitated. This was the moment where everything broke open, not just legally, but emotionally, because no matter what was written on those pages, I had loved those kids as my own. I still did. "It concludes," I said quietly, "that I am not the biological father of all 3 children." My ex-wife shot to her feet. "That's a lie. He forged it. He's trying to escape responsibility." Her voice cracked, not with anger, but with panic. The judge ordered her to sit down again, his voice sharp this time. "I will not tolerate outbursts." He turned to the documents, adjusting his glasses as he read. Each second felt like an hour. I stared at the wall, unable to breathe. Finally, he looked up. "These documents appear legitimate, and they were conducted at different intervals over several years." Several years. That was the part that hurt the most. This wasn't one mistake. It was a pattern, a choice. I turned around then and looked at her. Her face had gone pale, almost white. Her lips trembled, and for the first time since I had known her, she couldn't find words. I wanted to scream. I wanted to cry. Instead, I asked the question that had been burning inside me since the night I opened that envelope. Which one of them knew, and how long were you planning to let me live a lie? She opened her mouth, but nothing came out. As the judge called for a recess and ordered further testimony, I realized the envelope didn't just expose the truth, it forced a confession she could no longer escape. The judge called for a short recess, but no one really relaxed. My ex-wife stayed seated, staring straight ahead, like she could erase the last 10 minutes by refusing to acknowledge them. Her lawyer whispered urgently into her ear, flipping through notes as if searching for a miracle. I stepped outside the courtroom and leaned against the cold wall. My hands were shaking now, not from fear of the law, but from the memories clawing their way back. I remembered the first time she told me she was pregnant, We were young, struggling, barely holding things together. I had been scared, but proud. I promised I'd be there no matter what. I meant it. When the second child came, I didn't question anything. Families grow. Life happens. But the third, that one had always felt different. I had brushed off the doubts. Real men don't question their families. That's what I told myself. Love doesn't ask for proof. The courtroom doors opened again, and we were called back in. This time, the judge asked my ex-wife to speak. She stood slowly, her confidence gone. Her voice trembled as she tried to regain control. "Your Honor, I didn't plan for this to happen." The judge didn't react. "Answer the questions directly." She swallowed. "I was unfaithful." The word hit the room like a dropped glass. "Once?" the judge asked. She hesitated. My chest tightened. "No," she whispered. "More than once." I felt something inside me crack, not shatter, crack, because part of me had already known. The envelope had just confirmed it. She explained how years ago, when our marriage was strained and money was tight, she sought comfort elsewhere, how it became easier to lie than to admit the truth, how every year she told herself she'd confess, but never did. "And the children?" the judge asked. She squeezed her eyes shut. "I didn't know for sure. I assumed, I hoped." I laughed softly, bitterly. "You hoped I'd never find out." She looked at me then, tears streaming down her face. "I was protecting the family." "No," I said. "You were protecting yourself." The judge reviewed the documents again. "According to these tests, the respondent is not the biological father of any of the 3 children." The words echoed. Not any. I felt dizzy. All 3? I had braced myself for 1, maybe 2, but all 3? That meant the bedtime stories, the scraped knees, the school concerts, all of it had been built on a lie I never agreed to live. My ex-wife sobbed openly now. "He's still their father. He raised them." The judge nodded slowly. "That may be true emotionally, but legally this changes the matter of child support." Her lawyer stood up quickly. "Your Honor, regardless of biology, he assumed the role of father. And I assumed honesty. I assumed my wife wouldn't betray me and then demand payment for her lies." The room went silent again. The judge raised his hand. "Enough. There is more to discuss here than finances." He turned to my ex-wife. "Who else knew?" Her breathing became uneven. I already knew the answer, but I needed to hear it. "My sister," she whispered, "and my mother." My knees nearly gave out. Family. The people who smiled at me during holidays, who praised me for being a good father, who watched me sacrifice everything, knowing the truth the entire time. That betrayal cut deeper than the affair ever could. As the judge ordered my ex-wife's family to be summoned for testimony, I realized the courtroom was about to expose a betrayal far bigger than one woman's lies. I used to believe betrayal came from strangers. I was wrong. Sometimes it comes from people who sit at your dinner table and pass you the salt with a smile. The judge ordered a continuation of the hearing for the following day. When I returned to the courtroom, her family was already there. Her mother sat in the front row,
hands folded neatly in her lap, face calm, too calm. Her sister sat beside her, eyes downcast, twisting a tissue between her fingers. They wouldn't look at me. That told me everything. The judge called her mother to the stand first. She walked confidently, like someone who believed she had done nothing wrong. She swore the oath and adjusted the microphone. "You were aware of your daughter's affairs?" the judge asked. "Yes," she said plainly. The word punched the air out of my lungs. "And you knew there was uncertainty regarding the children's paternity?" She nodded. "Yes." I clenched my fists. "Then why?" I blurted out. "Why let me believe they were mine?" She turned to look at me, really look at me, for the first time in years. "Because you were stable," she said. "You provided. You were good for them." Good for them. Not deserving of the truth, just useful. She went on, explaining how she convinced her daughter not to confess, how she said it would destroy the family, how she told herself that biology didn't matter as long as the children were cared for. "What about my right to know?" I asked. She hesitated. "We believed you wouldn't leave." Her words were cold, calculated. They hadn't trusted my love. They had exploited it. Next, the judge called her sister. She stood shaking, barely able to meet my eyes. "I wanted to tell him," she said through tears. "I really did." "But you didn't," the judge said. "No," she admitted, "because every time I tried, my mother said it wasn't my place, that it would ruin everything." I laughed quietly. It already did. The judge sighed deeply, rubbing his temples. "This court is not just reviewing a financial dispute, it's reviewing years of deception." My ex-wife broke down completely. She cried about fear, about regret, about love. She said she never meant it for to go this far. But betrayal doesn't need intention to destroy. It only needs silence. The judge dismissed her family and turned to me. "Sir, given the evidence, you are not legally obligated to pay child support." Relief washed over me, but it was hollow. Money wasn't what I had lost. I had lost years of my life. Then the judge asked a question I hadn't prepared for. "What do you want to do about the children?" The room froze. I looked down at my hands. These hands had held them when they were born, had wiped their tears, had taught them how to ride bikes. "They didn't lie," I said quietly. "They didn't choose this." The judge nodded. "Then you may petition for visitation or continued involvement if you wish." My ex-wife looked at me with hope in her eyes, but I wasn't ready to answer, because there was still one truth I hadn't revealed. I stood up slowly. "Your Honor, there's something else in the envelope." Her face drained of color. Even her mother stiffened. The judge leaned forward. "Go on." I took a breath. The paternity results weren't the only documents inside. As I reached back into the envelope one last time, I knew the final truth would change not just the court's decision, but every relationship in that room forever. My fingers trembled as I reached back into the envelope. The courtroom felt smaller now, like the walls were closing in, pressing everyone toward the truth, whether they were ready or not. I pulled out the remaining pages. They weren't medical reports. They were emails, printed, dated, organized. The judge adjusted his glasses again. "What are these documents?" "Correspondence," I said, "between my ex-wife, her mother, and the men she was involved with." A sharp gasp echoed from the front row. My ex-wife stood up suddenly. "Those are private! They have nothing to do with this!" The judge's voice was calm but firm. "Sit down. If they're relevant, I'll decide." I nodded. "They're relevant, Your Honor, because they show intent." I handed the pages to the clerk. As the judge began reading, the room filled with a silence heavier than any shouting match. The first email was from years ago, before our second child was even born. My ex-wife had written to her mother asking what to do if the baby didn't look like me. Her mother's reply was chillingly practical. "Don't say anything. He won't question it. He needs this family as much as we need him." I felt sick hearing those words read aloud. The next email was worse. It was from her sister suggesting a paternity test just to be safe, followed by my ex-wife's response, "No tests, ever. If he finds out, everything collapses." That was the moment I stopped shaking, because this wasn't fear, it was strategy. The judge looked up slowly. "These messages suggest a coordinated effort to conceal the truth." "Yes," I said, "for over a decade." My ex-wife broke down completely now. She cried uncontrollably, repeating that she was scared, that she didn't know how to fix it once it went too far. But what broke me wasn't her crying. It was the timestamp on the final document. A message sent just weeks before she filed for child support. She had written to her mother, "If the court forces him to pay, we're set. Even if he finds out later, it won't matter." The judge exhaled slowly, his expression darkening. So this filing was not just about support, it was preemptive. "Yes," I said. "She thought I'd never see these." I hadn't until one of the men involved mailed the envelope anonymously after realizing he wasn't the only one. The irony was painful. A stranger had given me the truth my own family denied me. The judge closed the file. "This court finds evidence of deliberate deception and bad faith." My ex-wife's lawyer sank back into his chair, defeated. "Additionally, this court will be referring this matter for further legal review regarding fraud." Her mother's face went pale for the first time. I should have felt victorious. Instead, I felt empty. The judge turned to me again. "Sir, you were manipulated, lied to, and financially targeted. The law is on your side." I nodded, but my eyes drifted to the door. Because outside that courtroom were 3 kids who still believed I was their father. And inside that envelope was one final note I hadn't shared yet. A handwritten letter from my ex-wife, written years ago, never sent. I held it up. "Your Honor, may I read this?" She looked at me, terrified. The judge nodded. "You may." As I unfolded the letter she never meant me to see, I realized it held the one truth that could either destroy what remained of our family or finally set us all free.
My hands felt numb as I unfolded the letter. The paper was yellowed at the edges, like it had been folded and unfolded too many times. I wondered how many nights she had stared at these words, deciding whether truth was worth the consequences. The courtroom was silent. I began to read. "If you're reading this, it means I finally failed at pretending." My voice cracked, but I continued. "I wanted to tell you so many times, every birthday, every time you held them and smiled like nothing could break us. I told myself that love made the lie acceptable, that you were happier not knowing." I stopped for a second, swallowing the lump in my throat.
But the truth is, I was afraid. Afraid you'd leave. Afraid I'd lose the only stable thing in my life. So I chose silence, and with every year, the silence became heavier. My ex-wife was sobbing openly now, her head in her hands. I finished the letter with the final lines. I don't expect forgiveness. I only hope that one day you'll understand that my worst mistake came from fear, not hate. I folded the letter slowly and placed it back into the envelope. Fear. Such a small word for something that destroys lives. The judge cleared his throat. Thank you. This letter confirms awareness of deception, but also shows remorse. Remorse didn't give me my years back. Then the judge asked the question that changed everything. Have the children been informed? The room froze. No, my ex-wife whispered. They don't know. I closed my eyes. Those kids still called me Dad, still waited for my car in the driveway, still believed I was permanent. The judge looked at me gently. Sir, the law may release you, but emotionally, this is your decision. I stood up, my legs unsteady. I won't disappear, I said. Not today, not like this. My ex-wife looked up, hope flickering in her red-rimmed eyes. But things won't stay the same, I added. Truth doesn't work that way. The judge nodded. This court will grant temporary time for disclosure and counseling. No financial obligation will be enforced at this time. He struck the gavel lightly. The hearing was over, but the real battle was just beginning. Outside the courtroom, her family avoided my eyes. Her mother looked smaller somehow, stripped of her authority. Her sister whispered an apology I didn't respond to. Then I saw the kids. They were sitting on a bench down the hall, swinging their legs, arguing over a phone game. When they saw me, their faces lit up. Dad, the youngest shouted, jumping up. That word, it hit harder than any verdict. I knelt down and hugged them all at once. They smelled of shampoo and innocence. None of this was their fault. We're going to talk later, I said softly, about everything. They nodded, trusting me completely. That trust terrified me. As we walked away, my ex-wife called my name. I turned. She whispered, I know I don't deserve it, but thank you for not destroying them. I looked at her, really looked. I didn't spare them, I said quietly. I spared myself, because there was one final decision I hadn't made yet. That night, alone with the truth and 3 sleeping children down the hall, I had to decide, was love enough to stay, or was walking away the only honest choice left? That night was the longest of my life. The house was quiet, but my mind wasn't. I sat at the kitchen table long after midnight, staring at nothing, listening to the soft breathing of 3 children asleep in the next room. For years, that sound had meant peace. Now it felt like a question with no easy answer. I replayed everything: the courtroom, the envelope, the lies, the letter. I thought about how easily love can be used as a leash when honesty is missing. I could leave. Legally, I had every right to. No judge would blame me. No law would force me to stay. People would call me strong for walking away from betrayal. But strength isn't always about leaving. Just before sunrise, I heard footsteps. The oldest stood in the doorway, rubbing his eyes. "Dad, you okay?" I nodded and pulled him into a hug. "Yeah, just thinking." "About court?" he asked. "About life," I replied. He leaned against me, trusting, unaware of how fragile everything really was. In that moment, the answer became clear. The next morning, I asked my ex-wife to meet me. No lawyers, no shouting, just truth. We sat across from each other, exhausted, broken in different ways. "I'm not staying because you lied, and I'm not staying because I owe you anything." She lowered her head, tears falling silently. "I'm staying," I continued, "because those kids deserve stability, and because walking away in anger would turn me into someone I don't want to be." She looked up, stunned. "You mean you forgive me?" "No," I said gently. "Forgiveness takes time, maybe years, maybe never." I set clear boundaries: counseling, transparency, no more secrets, and one truth that couldn't be avoided anymore. The children would be told, carefully, honestly, with professional help. When we told them, there were tears, confusion, anger, but there was also something unexpected: choice. I told them I wasn't leaving, but I gave them the option to decide how they wanted our relationship to look. I wouldn't trap them in another lie. The youngest hugged me and said, "You're still my dad." The others took longer, and that was okay. Months passed. Some days were heavy, some nights were lonely. Trust doesn't rebuild overnight, but truth gave us something lies never did: a foundation. As for the court case, it closed quietly. No child support, no fraud charges pursued after settlements, no public victory, just private consequences. I still think about the envelope sometimes, how one piece of paper can collapse an entire life, or save it depending on what you do next. If there's one lesson I learned, it's this: family isn't defined by blood alone, but it is defined by truth. And betrayal doesn't always end relationships. Sometimes it exposes who you really are when everything is taken away. I wasn't the man who walked out of that courtroom angry and empty. I was the man who chose honesty over pride and responsibility over revenge. And that choice, more than any verdict, changed everything.